Redshift here, doing my part to shift perceptions out of the pink and into the red. This is going to be another video expanding on or giving even more things that I thought about regarding the topic of women going to college and things like this. And I made that response video without a script to that comment left by Old Man Flappy Nuts, and then I thought of a few more things that I probably should have said in that video but didn't, so I am making this additional video to respond more thoroughly to the whole thing about women going to college and things like that as well. But this one does have a script, and it goes like this. More about having two wives, or, I think I started out as if it was a note or something. But regarding having two wives or a fuck buddy other than your wife or whatever, even though she knows about it and allows you to have sex with that other woman, that's going to cause problems in your relationship because she's not going to be as submissive. She's not going to want to not go to college. She's not going to want to not work, etc. She's going to want to go to college and she's going to want to work and all that stuff if you want to have two wives or if you want to have a polyamorous third or a fuck buddy or a live-in concubine or whatever in addition to her. Right? Like, if you want that, if you try to get her to agree with that, maybe she will agree to it, your future wife or your wife, right? But that makes her act differently. It's like, okay, I'll allow you to have sex with other women, but it also means I can't trust you as much, so I'm definitely going to go to college and work. Because if you decide to leave me, I need to have a backup plan. I got to be able to take care of myself. She knows that the odds that you're going to leave her are higher if you have another woman, if you're sleeping with other women, right? So she's going to want to go to college way more if you're not totally devoted to her and totally monogamous, you see? So you got to realize that dynamic is in play there as well. You also got to realize that more women means more problems, and either they're going to fight amongst each other, which causes you problems, like if you have two wives or a wife and a girlfriend that your wife allows you to have or whatever. You're going to be breaking up fights between them on a regular basis, or they'll be fighting with each other behind the scenes, and you don't have to see it or deal with it much, but they'll be coming to you and whining and complaining and crying to you about how the other girl is treating her. And then you got to comfort her, but at the same time try to smooth things over and be like, I'm sure the other girl feels this way or whatever, but then she'll accuse you of taking the other girl's side. She'll be like, I'm your wife, you should be defending me, you should be taking my side. And then it's going to be fights and arguments and stuff over that. Right? It's been said that the more money you have, the more problems you have. You know, like P. Diddy once said, that's one song or whatever, right? Or he said, mo money, mo problems, right? Well, that applies to women too, right? Like more women, more problems. And not to, guys have this idea that like more women would be great, right? But no, not really. And not to mention the fact that if they do get along, if you have two wives or a wife and a girlfriend or whatever, or two girlfriends and they do get along, well then now they're joined together against you and now they've got you outnumbered. It's hard enough to keep one woman under control, much less keep two women under control. And plus, they can act as sounding boards for each other and they can also come up with strategies on how to manipulate you more effectively. It's like they say, I heard this detective on some true crime show once said something like he had the motto or whatever on catching some serial killer or whoever it was that this person may be smarter than us, but we got 20 or 50 people or whatever working on this case, so our collective brain power is bigger than his, right? That's how it is, right? Like, each woman might individually be dumber than you, but like put together they might shore up each other's weaknesses. One has one ideas the other would not have thought of, and that second one has ideas the first one wouldn't have thought of. So, as a whole, they're more effective at manipulation. They're more effective at, doing strategies to manipulate you that take two people instead of one. They can pool their knowledge, and they can pool their cunning, and this can make them more dangerous because they're working together against you. So really, even if they're not trying to divorce rape you, it's just like, they're trying to get their way. And so they get their way more often because they're united against you, right? So really, having two women is not a good idea from that perspective as well. Not to mention, it's like, she probably doesn't want you to have another woman, nor should she. Number one, either you pick a girl who's okay with you having another woman, whether it's a fuck buddy or a live-in concubine or a wife or whatever, she's okay with you having another woman, in which case, she's probably a girl who lacks self-respect, and that's why she's okay with you having another woman, and or she's probably just a girl who's after you for your money or whatever, right? So she doesn't really love you. And why marry a girl who doesn't really love you? You know what I mean? Like any girl who would accept her man having another wife or another mistress or whatever is a girl who is, not a good girl. She's far from an AWOL. Number two, even if she actually is okay with it, maybe she finds out after you, like you say, I'd like to sleep with other women, or I'd like to have a mistress or second wife or whatever, and she thinks she'd be okay with that. So you marry her first, and then you maybe immediately, or maybe after a while, a few years, you start looking for a second wife or a second girlfriend or another girlfriend or whatever. And then your wife finds out, like, she thought she'd be okay with it, but then she realizes she's actually not okay with it, right? Like, she thought she'd be okay with it, but then she realizes it really upsets her. And then that can cause big problems because you married her thinking that, like, she'd be okay with it, and she thought she'd be okay with it, but then she finds out she's not okay with it, with you sleeping with other women, right? Like, if you married a second wife, then if you divorce her, you better do it quickly, or else she'll be able to hit you with alimony and stuff, right? And if she has kids with you, that first wife does, then, you can't get rid of her, even though she's not okay with you sleeping with other women. And if you sleep with other women anyway, then it's going to cause tons of problems, right? And let's say you start sleeping with this other woman. What if you get her pregnant? And she was just supposed to be a girlfriend that you were just going to have for a year or two or three. Now, maybe she doesn't even want to marry you or something. And so now you got to pay child support, right? All because you just wanted some sex on the side because you wanted sexual variety, right? It's not good, It's going to be an ongoing payment. It's not like you got to pay her off with one-time payment. It's like you're going to have to pay and pay and pay and pay, right? So even if you're willing to give up that second woman who your wife thought she'd be okay with you having, but discovered she wasn't able to emotionally handle you having, it can still turn out disastrous, even if you're not being selfish, right? Like, you can't really even get rid of her completely if you got her pregnant accidentally, right? It could be disastrous. And even if you do get rid of her without any complications or expenses, it can still be very bad, because even just having sex with another woman one time can permanently damage the bond you have with your wife. It's like wife swapping. Once you let another guy fuck your wife, there's no undoing it. It causes permanent damage to your relationship with your wife and permanent change to how she views you and your relationship with her, right? And her need to be faithful. It totally changes the whole marriage, if you let another guy fuck your wife even once. Same thing here. She will always know that you had sex with another girl while you were married to her. And even though it was with her permission, there will still be an inequality there. And it will make it more likely that your wife will cheat on you at some point down the road, because in her mind, the scales are not even. So she feels like she's entitled to sleep with another guy because you slept with another girl all those years ago, even though it was with her permission. And then she's going to sleep with another guy without your permission, right? And doing that once will make it more likely she'll do it again. And even if she doesn't, maybe you catch her and then you leave her because you found her cheating on you. And then there's huge expenses financially and heartbreak that go along with leaving her. Or you stay with your wife, but now your relationship is permanently hugely damaged because of her having cheated. And then the relationship is never as good as it used to be. And even if she doesn't cheat on you, she may throw it back in your face every time you guys fight. You get in an argument about something else, she'll always bring up the fact that you slept with another girl, even though it was with her permission. Women are irrational like that. And even if she doesn't hold it against you, it might make her trust you less. It might make her far more insecure because of her being afraid you'll leave her at some point in the future, such as when she loses her looks. And dealing with an insecure wife is not a very pleasant thing. And another thing is that if your wife agrees to let you sleep with other women, then she's going to be more shallow as well. If you're so lustful that you feel the need to sleep with other women, then she's going to realize the relationship is a more shallow thing. It's not so much about love, right? It's, number one, it isn't about love as much, and number two, she's going to know that it's not about love as much. And that it's more about lust. And if you're allowed to follow your base urges instead of following your more noble and spiritual side, if you're allowed to have sex with other women on the side, then she's probably going to think that she's entitled to do the same thing, to be shallow as well. So then she'll probably be more materialistic and will either demand that you make more money and act like it's a totally reasonable thing to nag you constantly to make more money, or she'll always be looking out for a richer guy to trade up to. And then she can divorce you and then get with that guy instead. It's to your benefit to get women to be as spiritual as possible, as virtue-oriented as possible. And virtue includes not just fidelity and kindness and such, but it also includes things like frugality, contentedness, and other such virtues which are good to have in a wife, right? You want your wife to not just be faithful and kind, but also frugal and contented and stuff like that, right? If your wife is not frugal and content, then you're going to suffer a lot because of her tendency to spend a lot of money and her tendency to never be content. instead always be complaining. So if you want to sleep with other women, then even if she lets you, it's a case of you nevertheless putting your relationship on the wrong footing by not being satisfied with your wife, and that will end up backfiring on you. There is no such thing as a free lunch. There's no such thing as having sex with other women other than your wife without it resulting in serious consequences at some point down the line. Although it might take a good, 10 years or even longer before those consequences occur. So maybe you think you're getting away with it for a while, for maybe even quite a few years, but ultimately the consequences fall due all at once, and then it's like a brick wall falling down on you all at once, and then you realize, holy shit, I never should have done that in the first place. It's absolutely critical to realize that sexuality is something you don't fuck around with unless you're suicidal. If you try to do unconventional things with sexuality, things other than monogamous traditionalism, which avoids premarital sex, then it will almost always end badly, whether sooner or later. And if not on an individual level, then definitely on a society-wide level. And even if you do it on an individual level and get away with it, you're still encouraging it to, other people to do the same thing because they saw that you got away with it, and then they do it. And then on a numbers level, most people don't get away with it. And then it ruins all of society. Sexuality is like nuclear energy. It's serious business. And you have to be very careful, or else you can fuck up your own life or the lives of other people in a spectacularly huge fashion. Monogamy existed for thousands of years for a reason. There are even severe problems with the MGTOW commune, which uses one living concubine for every 3 men, which is something that I discuss in another video. I'm not sure if I'll put it out before or after this video, but I just recorded it before I recorded this video. Not to mention, both girls are going to realize which one of them you love more if you have 2 women. Because the odds that you're going to love both of them the exact same are pretty damn low. You're going to love one of them more than the other, almost certainly, even if you do love both of them. I think that was even in the Old Testament. I can't remember who it was, but one of the guys in the Old Testament, if I remember correctly, had 2 wives, and one of them he loved, and the other he either didn't or didn't love as much. This is almost always going to be the case. You're going to love one of your sexual partners more than the other one, and then the one who's loved more, she might flaunt it. She might rub it in the other girl's face, making her even more upset than she already is about the situation. And the girl who's loved less, even if the other girl is loved more, is not shoving it in her face, the other girl who you love less is still going to feel insecure and depressed and upset about the fact that you love her less than the other girl. She's not going to want to be the one who's loved less. And marrying only one woman and having a fuck buddy or a concubine on the side doesn't make the situation any easier. Just because a girl is only a fuck buddy or a concubine doesn't mean you won't love her more than your wife. And if you love or like your fuck buddy or concubine more than your wife, then your wife will be doubly angry because you love or like the other woman more than her, even though she's not even your wife. Right? Your wife will feel entitled to a greater share of your love because she's the wife. And so the fact that she's the wife and she's not getting that greater love will be especially frustrating and depressing and enraging to her. It makes her whole wife title obsolete and hollow and empty. And it's just an insult that, yeah, she's your wife, but basically only technically because you really love the other girl more. And even if you don't love the other girl more, your wife might think you love her more. And then your wife will accuse you of loving the other girl more, even though that's not true at all. You don't love the other girl more. So she'll be constantly accusing you of loving the other girl more, and you're having to constantly try to convince her that you don't love the other girl more. And yet, because you're sleeping with the other girl and your wife is convinced that you love her more, you're never able to fully convince your wife of the truth, that you don't really love the other girl more. Maybe you don't love the other girl at all. You just like having sex with her, and that's it. But your wife thinks you love her more, or thinks you like her more. And so you get in as much trouble over it as if you really did love the other girl more, or like her more. Do you really want your wife bringing it up in every argument about other topics? Do you want her always saying things like, you're always spending time with her, you treat her better than you treat me, you guys do more things than we do, we don't do anything fun anymore, she gets the best part of you, she gets to have fun with you, I don't, I'm sick of it. Like, you're going to get endless harassment over it. Like, having more than one woman is just a clusterfuck all the way around. It's a clusterfuck in terms of how many problems you got to deal with, as well as in terms of the functionality of the household and stuff, and in terms of the kids. Like, the kids are maybe not going to get along because you have 2 tribes. Like, if you have 2 wives and you give both those wives 2 kids, so you have 4 kids, then there's you, 2 wives, and 4 kids all living in the same house. Well, the kids from wife number 1 are full siblings to each other, and the kids from wife number 2 are full siblings with each other. But the kids from wife number 1 and wife number 2 are only half siblings with each other. So any rivalry or contentions or arguments between them, between half siblings, is going to be magnified because it's like, you're the other tribe. You're not even my full sibling. Fuck you. My mom's better than your mom. My mom's the favored wife. Or it's like, fuck you, your dad never treated my mom as well as he treats your mom. Fuck you, you guys are the favored ones. You don't have any right to think badly of me. You always had it easier than we did because dad loved you guys more. It would be more trouble between the kids as well, and there's more interpersonal conflict. There's all this romantic rivalry between the wives, and then there's all this competition over attention. Two wives means two sets of problems: more medical bills, more clothes you gotta buy, more demands on your time, more demands on your libido, which might seem great when you're younger, but is maybe a massive annoyance when you're older. And maybe they both want to sleep with you more because of being in competition with each other, and that increases their libidos, and so being more attractive to both of them because of you being desired by another woman. And so then, that makes both of them have perpetually a higher libido, perhaps, than they would if you were married to just one of them. And thus, maybe it's much harder to meet the sexual needs than both of them. So instead of it being like 1 plus 1 in terms of how much libido you have to meet, it's more like 1.5 times 1.5, because both of them have higher libidos than they would if you were married to just one of them. You see? So then, instead of meeting the libido needs of twice as many women, because you have twice as many women, you're actually having to have sex with the women like 3 times as much as you would if you just had one wife. So then it's like, overload. It's just really, really draining. That could very well be the case. I'm not saying that would always be the case or how often it's the case, but I'm sure in some, bigamist couples that is the case, right? And it's probably quite hard, maybe not when he's younger, 20s or even 30s, but, when he's in his 40s, it probably gets pretty hard to meet the sexual needs of 2 women, right? So, you gotta take that into consideration as well. Although it could work in your favor, maybe, because if they have higher libidos, but you're not sleeping with them any more than you want to, that keeps them a bit sexually deprived. And then they're, horny all the time, and then they're no longer the sexual gatekeeper. Then you're the sexual gatekeeper, and then you have more power because of that. And it would make it. Although the downside of that is that, if you're keeping both your wives horny all the time because of not having sex with them as much as they'd like you to, then that means that perhaps, they were more likely to cheat. So, and then you get divorce raped, and then, that's a big downside. So there's many downsides to having more than one woman. So many that it's really crazy. I think a lot of people are misguided about it and think it would be awesome to have more than one woman. To have 2 wives or to have one wife and a fuck buddy or whatever. But actually, it's not awesome at all. It's double the problems, maybe triple the problems because of it, like I said, being not just a synergistically bad thing in terms of libido, but like synergistically bad in terms of like nagging, right? And them fighting with each other and stuff, right? So instead of dealing with twice as many, arguments because of having 2 wives, you're dealing with something like more, like 3 or 4 times as many arguments because of having 2 wives. Even though you only have 2 wives, you're having 3 to 4 times as many arguments as if you only had 1 wife. Even though you only have 2 wives. Not to mention all the societal instability and violence that is caused because of the fact that, if you're being a bigamist, a lot of other men are going to be bigamists, and then you have, if a bunch of men do that, you have a huge population of incels, and that's assuming, and like if everybody was trying to be bigamist, then 50% of the population of men would be incels, and that's assuming that none of the men at the top are ever being promiscuous, but are just, waiting until marriage waiting till marriage to have sex, to lose their virginity, and then they marry 2 women, right? But of course that's not the case. Top men are being promiscuous as well, even if they do eventually marry 2 women or just 1 woman. They're still being promiscuous before that. And so, a bigamist society would actually probably, you got to deal with the bigamy and the promiscuity. So that would probably mean 70 to 95% of men would be incels. And that would cause a lot of violence. There'd probably be violent revolution over it. Or killing sprees every day over the issue, or maybe even a spree in every city every day. Bigamy is not good. Whether it's official bigamy, like you're actually marrying them, or whether it's just the guy having a wife and another girlfriend, or another fuck buddy. It's almost the same thing. There's just so many downsides to it that it's mind-blowing, both on an individual level and a society-wide level. And I think the women probably know that ahead of time. And women are kind of desperate, so if they see you as a valuable guy, especially if they don't have a lot of experience, or if they don't have a lot of confidence, if they're just average looking or whatever, then they're going to want to be agreeable. And so they're going to agree, like, oh yeah, I'd be okay if you had another woman. Like, women are agreeable, but that doesn't mean that she's actually okay with it. She's just saying she's okay with it because she doesn't want to lose you. And I think she knows ahead of time that she could end up being the girl who you love less, and that she would hate that. But she doesn't want to be disagreeable, so she says she's okay with you having another woman, even though she's not. Just like a lot of times girls will say they're okay being just fuck buddies with a guy, even though she actually doesn't like being a fuck buddy. She wants him to be her boyfriend, but She doesn't want to lose him, and she also does not want to look desperate, and so she says she's okay, that she's totally fine with him just being her fuck buddy, and because she hopes that eventually he'll fall in love with her and he'll actually become her boyfriend and he'll turn to a real relationship, right? That's what she's hoping. So she's just lying and being agreeable. So even if a woman says she's okay with you having another woman, a fuck buddy or a live-in concubine or another wife, that doesn't actually mean she's really actually okay with it. I also should point out the fact that if you can't be satisfied with one woman, that is, if you can't be, fine being, sexually faithful to just one woman, just sleeping with one woman for the rest of your life, then you're unlikely to be able to be satisfied with 2 women, or even 3 women, or even 4 women. That wouldn't satisfy you either. The only thing that might satisfy you would be if your wife let you have sex with lots of other women as if you were still single. But of course that raises your chances of getting an STD, and if you use condoms to prevent getting an STD, then the sex with the other women who are not your wife is unsatisfying. And if you don't use a condom, then if she doesn't have an STD, there's at least a much higher chance of getting another girl pregnant, right? And then one of the main reasons to get married in the first place is to avoid getting a woman pregnant out of wedlock, because out of wedlock pregnancy is very destructive, not just to you and your finances, but destructive to the kids as well. So I think the only moral, rational, sustainable solution for a guy who can't be monogamous and restrict his sexual appetites to just one woman, well, I shouldn't say the only solution, the only solutions, plural, are for a guy who cannot be sexually faithful to just one woman for the rest of his life. There's only a few solutions. One is to use prostitutes for his whole life. Another is to do the live-in concubine thing, preferably in a MGTOW commune that has far more men than women, so it's like 3 men for every 1 woman. And the other is to be, I think I had one more solution to that, but maybe it wasn't. Maybe there's only those 2 solutions. I can't remember. But, yeah, there's not very many solutions if you can't be monogamous. At least without being a predatory scumbag who's turning other men into incels, which is unsustainable. Polygamy is untenable on a society-wide level. Promiscuity is even more untenable on a society-wide level. Even only serial monogamy is untenable on a society-wide level. Serial monogamy is also a bad thing. The only things that are sustainable and that don't create gynocentrism and that therefore don't create violence on a society-wide level are either using prostitutes only for your whole life, never dating any women, or being monogamous, marrying and only having sex with your wife, or, being a MGTOW man who lives in a commune and uses live-in concubines, like 1 woman for every 3 men. And that's necessary because if it were 1 woman for every, or if it were like 2 women for every 3 men, then, they're going to churn through twice as many women because, the span of female beauty is half as long as the span of female libido, so then it would actually be those 3 guys using up 4 women over their whole life. And 4 women for every 3 guys is using up more than their fair share, therefore it's creating gynocentrism, and therefore creating incels, and therefore creating violence and insanity, you see, in society at large. So really, it would have to be like 2 men for every 1 woman, or preferably something like 3 men for every 1 woman. Because I say a woman's span of beauty is actually less than half as long as a man's span of libido. Because a lot of men have libido into their 60s, and a lot of women lose their looks by 30, and you can't have sex with them until they're 18, so that's less than half as long. So then, even if you had 2 men for every 1 woman in a live-in concubine MGTOW commune, that would still be using up more than your fair share. So really, it should be 3 men for every 1 woman to make it non-gynocentric. And if you want women to stay out of the workforce and stay out of college and stuff, you got to be willing to take care of them. You got to be willing to be devoted to only her and be faithful to her alone. No extramarital sex, not even with her permission, because that's just going to fuck everything up. Not to mention, she's probably some kind of mercenary chick who's only in it for the money and the procreation if she's okay with you sleeping with other women, and you don't want a girl like that. That would be terrible. Your kids would be like her as well. That's another reason. Not only because you don't want to deal with a woman like that, and or a woman like that is more likely to divorce rape you when she gets bored of you, but also you'd have more problems with your kids because your kids would be like her. They'd have those psychopathic genes, not those non-NAWALT genes. So if you had sons, they'd be, kind of psychopathic, and if you had women, they'd be, probably they're very promiscuous and predatory and stuff, right? So, then you'd have to deal with not only a mercenary woman, but you'd have to deal with ruthless kids like that as well. Getting to have sex with other women is not sufficient compensation for your wife being a mercenary type of female. Her kids will be like her, your daughters will be like her, and your sons will be more psychopathic than you are, and that's no good. moral people, especially moral women, should be breeding the most. Every moral woman should be barefoot and pregnant perpetually through her whole pregnancy years. Let's say 16 to 35. She should be pregnant every single year from 16 to 35. There's just not enough Nawalts out there. If we have all the Nawalts breeding like crazy like that, having 10, 15 kids each, and all the non-Nawalts breeding not very much at all, only having 1 or 2 kids, you could quickly, radically change the country and make it just chock full of Nawalts. And that would be hugely good for humanity. Now, I'm not advocating for it, but just like it would be good for humanity if we forcibly exsanguinated all the liberals, all the statists, and all the guys without any self-respect or courage or morality, right? Like, if we did that, that would be hugely good for humanity. I'm not advocating for it, but I'm saying, if we did it, it'd be good, right? The effect would be good. Statists are like women, they depend on some power greater than themselves. They depend on government. That's not good. That's not masculine, right? And liberal men are very much like this. They're feminine men. And they trust and rely on government because they're cowardly and they're foolish and they're gullible. They don't want to take care of themselves. They don't want to carry a gun. They don't want to appreciate freedom. I mean, they don't appreciate freedom. They don't understand the evil of government. But it's so stupid because the government doesn't actually help them at all anyway. So it's like, what are they clinging to? It makes no sense. Any money the government gives them or gives anybody is just stolen from people who rightfully earned it. It makes no sense. Government has no money at all. The only money it has is what it steals from the people at the barrel of a gun through so-called taxation, which is nothing more than theft. But anyway, if we literally, no one deserves a single penny. No one deserves to take a single penny from you, at all. Forcibly. Now they can encourage you to donate to them, but if they're doing the right thing and deserve to be donated to, then you will donate to them, won't you? Because most people are good people. So literally, when you earn the money through this sweat of your brow, or your hard work, wasting your life working, nobody, including government, has a right to take a single penny from you. A single penny. Because taking even a single penny is theft. Forcible taking of even a tiny amount of wealth is theft, and it's that simple. And everybody should have the self-respect to realize that. But anyway, if we exsanguinated all the liberal, cowardly, statist men, and then we bred the Nawalts like crazy, we could have a relative utopia, an incredible world where almost all the women are Nawalts, and almost all the men are brave and masculine and moral and principled and independent, and do not believe in government. That's what you want. You want a world where all the women are highly moral, but highly intelligent also. Some women are intelligent, but not very moral, while other women are moral, but are pretty stupid. But what you want is women like Christy O'Misty. Women who are both highly moral and highly intelligent. Just like you can have men who are highly aggressive and yet are highly moral. It absolutely can exist, and it does exist. I'm not saying those guys are real common. I'm just saying that it's not just psychopathic men who are highly aggressive. There are men out there who are highly moral and highly aggressive. If you had a world full of Nawalts and almost all guys were highly brave and highly intelligent and highly principled and independent and moral, if you had a world like that, it would be a really, really great place to live in. And we could make it like that. I think that's about all I had to say about this particular topic. This has been Redshift. Peace.